Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a second, let me get this pulled up. So we are continuing our discussion on this book, Love Poems from God. And it's just a series of poems, and we've just been kind of reading through them and discussing, sort of what they mean to each of us. I am going to start off. We had finished with St. Francis of Assisi, and that's page 3. And so if you want to go to page 3, but I'm going to start us off with a prayer, and we can all just read it together. And then just get centered for the class today. And the poem, the prayer is up here. And you may have heard this. It's the prayer of St. Francis, and I picked this since that's where we had left off. So, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. And let's get centered into our hearts, and we'll just take a few moments to just be present here in this room. Be present to the Spirit, indwelling Spirit, the indwelling Christ. Okay. So the format that we did last time was that we would read a poem and then we would just discuss sort of what that meant to us. And if anybody has any comments about this particular prayer, this is one of my favorite prayers and I use it regularly. Has anybody, is this the first time? Yeah, has other people have seen this prayer before? Yeah, it's really common, especially common in like recovery groups and things like that. So does anybody have any comments about this particular prayer that he wrote? Can you use the microphone so they can hear us?
Oh,
yes.
Yes. I love this poem. It's been one of my favorite poems for many, many years. And did a class on this poem a few years ago and found out that it was actually, I mean, I hate to burst the bubble, but it was not written by St. Francis. It was actually written in the early 1900s. And it was attributed to St. Francis, and which is great. And I will leave it at that. There's much more story to it. But
Right. Yeah, that's not surprising at all. Actually, a lot of things were attributed to St. Francis that he never said or wrote or anything, and there's a lot of mythology surrounding just who he was as a person. Anybody else?
This is my very favorite too. I love this prayer. I have it on my refrigerator and I look at it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it covers a lot. It really addresses, for me anyway, it addresses like my error thinking, where I need to, it sort of switches things around where I'm not striving to get and to get and to get, but I realize that it's when I'm giving, when I'm channeling the Spirit, that's what real abundance is, if I'm connected to my inner source and then I'm, sort of letting that channel through me, through things like generosity or, support or that sort of thing. And then also, it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And I think that sometimes people really get confused about what that means, because that shows up a lot in the Christian tradition. And it's really about change. Everything is always changing. But when we die, when we're willing to change, when we take, proactive measures to do so, that's when we experience life. So it's when we're releasing the programming, we're releasing all of that. In the Christian tradition, they say it's like being born again. In the Buddhist tradition, they call it the child mind, or the beginner's mind, where we're able to just experience life as it is. So, and then we'll move on to the next one. And if I could get a volunteer to read the next one. Do you want paper? Oh. I don't have my glasses on. No, that's all right. You don't have to volunteer. I'm asking for a volunteer. Or I'll volunteer if nobody else wants to.
Go ahead and read
Okay,
it, James.
thanks.
I'll be the volunteer. In all things, it was easy for me to love God, and all that was beautiful. The lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things.
Any comments on that?
I guess to me, it just shows that we have to sometimes look deeper at, we're attracted to certain things, and it's easy to find the beauty, and, it's easy to find God in that. But I think you even, brought this up last time you spoke, rather, that all things are God.
Right.
And sometimes it's that shadow that is going to teach us even more than those things that are beautiful. To actually find God in the darkest places is actually the key to brightness.
Right. Well, and I think too, it just in other people. Some people, no one is hard to love because love is unconditional. Love, like Sue says, I think the Fillmore said, loves for the sake of loving. But sometimes we look at certain people and our own criticisms and judgments come up as we're engaging with people around us, and I think that it addresses the interpersonal dynamics as well. As like sometimes we have to really address what's in us, because a judgment and a criticism doesn't exist out there. It always exists within us when we're looking at something that maybe is uncomfortable to see. And I think that's what St. Francis was getting at as well, that it is easy to love the beautiful, but we have to really work at and recognize what does it mean to love and embrace things that we've built a criticism or a judgment against, because again, that all happens in our mind. I mean, we may have had societal pressures, and we have all kinds of examples of those. I always like the example of like body image. There's everyone on this planet was born a perfect little baby, and you've never seen a baby gain her self-worth by measuring her hips. So we know that's a program. We know it's a program. And so, I think that one of the things, it's almost like a denial and an affirmation within this poem, where we're able to see, okay, God made all of this. Everything around us is God. And so there is beauty in all things. And so recognizing that, I think that's one of the things that St. Francis was getting at here. Does anybody else have a comment?
I would just say that, yes, it is easy because we've already learned. The things we've already learned, it's easy. We practice it. We believe it. What we're asking for is that the things I don't see, the things that you're bringing to me that are hard, instruct me to grab hold of it and learn something new from this that's being tossed before me.
Absolutely, yeah.
If I could just add to that, because that's perfect. It's actually loving those things because they are doing that. They are forcing us to grow.
Right, right. Yeah, that's how we expand. Is you know, if we just stay in our little comfortable bubble of I can love all of this because this is my little comfortable bubble. Well, we never really grow. We just stay the way that we are. And you know, the Bible has a lot of imagery of a seed dying and then, you know, turning into something greater. And that's really what, you know, the process of our own personal growth is like. That's what, you know, in the prayer, dying so that we can achieve eternal life, is that we have to be willing to change and to release that old pattern so that we can have something new, like a denial and an affirmation. Anybody else? All right, we can move on to the next one. Does anybody want to volunteer to read that one?
I guess me.
Yay.
Dear God, please reveal to us your sublime beauty that is everywhere, 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 so that we will never again feel frightened. My divine love, my love, please let us touch your face.
Any comments on that one? This was a prayer actually by St. Francis.
So, you know, this week we're going to be talking about meditation. So I've been doing a lot of research and reading and just contemplation. And this is you know, to me, one of the great benefits of that experience of meditation, where you're opening yourself up to, you know, let us touch your face, let us feel your presence. And in that, I know that ultimately whatever is going on in my life or around me, that I don't have to feel frightened about that, because there is something here that is supporting us, uplifting us, guiding us in all things. So that's where I go with it.
Right, and we're all here at a spiritual meeting, and you know, sometimes we need to ask the question: do I really believe that there is a power greater than myself that is loving me, guiding me, supporting me in all ways, in all things? Because, I mean, if you don't, it would make sense to be frightened. That would just make sense. If I thought I had to control the whole world, I would be very frightened. And so I think that when we're talking about, you know, spirituality and spiritual things, sometimes just asking that question about the circumstances that we're in. Do I really believe that there's a power greater than myself that is within me? It's the Christ within me that is guiding me and leading me forward into the right direction.
Every morning when I get up and do my journaling, I start out with, good morning, my love. And that, it didn't used to be that way, and that kind of evolved into that. And then I get this little, hey, honey, how you doing? Or what's up? And it's all 90% of the time it's cheerful, unless I'm in a really funky place. And and that isn't even what I was going to say, and I forgot.
But I love that. I love that. I know there's only two ways to really wake up. It's like, good morning, God, or good God, it's morning.
I know what it was. And then the next thing I do, because it's early, I said, oh, thank you, God, that the sun came up and I didn't have to do anything about it.
Right.
And for me, the feeling frightened, I used to see bad, and now everything's neutral. Everything's happening for my good. Mm-hmm. So it's perception. What I used to think was not a good thing is now good and neutral. It doesn't have to mean bad. I don't have to be afraid of it. There is a higher power watching over everything, including me.
Thank God. Right. And is still there even when I'm vacillating, because I can't maintain that all the time. And my teacher, who I saw her manifest, like, you know, she would say something and manifest things instantly almost. And she told me, before she passed away, she was only there around 80% of the time was she in that space where she really felt like she was confident and safe. And, you know, I mean, she's passing the torch along to all of us too. So, yeah. Anything else? All right. We will move on to St. John of the Cross. Okay, St. John of the Cross was born in 1542 near Avila, Spain, which seems like a lot of mystics were born around that area. It's very interesting. It kind of reminds me of Kansas City. A lot of spiritual movements and religions were started near Kansas City. So I'm always fascinated when I see, geographical areas that seem to have a lot of spirituality. There's St. Teresa of Avila is another person that he was connected to. And he was a contemporary of St. Teresa of Avila. I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'm just going to keep pronouncing it differently and hope one of the times it will be right. And as a teenager, he was educated at a Jesuit school. And so both he and Teresa were what were considered forced Christians. They were Jewish. And to be a part of society, their parents had to, it was actually their great-grandparents that ended up sort of being forced into Christianity. Otherwise, they would have been excommunicated from their communities. And so both St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila were a part of these forced Christians during the time. And so they had reached a point where they were very countercultural, because they saw their own history and they were questioning that. And so both of them were persecuted at the time because they were against the grain and they wanted to know the truth of God, not just the organization of God, because the organization of God was just a forced conversion. And so he became a Carmelite friar and was imprisoned by the Carmelite order for his beliefs. Most of his poetry was written while he was in prison, and you can kind of see it in some of the poetry. I don't think in the ones that I chose, but in some of the poetry you can kind of see that he's going through an internalized struggle. And he is known as, actually, yeah, I put it on here. He's considered one of the most highly revered Spanish poets, even to this day. Let's see, did I have something else? Oh, and then after his imprisonment, he worked with St. Teresa of Avila to establish Carmelite monasteries. And I believe they established 14. I probably have it when I go through St. Teresa. So I think they established 14.
I'm just, okay, so I'm confused. So he was a Carmelite friar, but he was imprisoned by the Carmelites, but then he established a Carmelite monastery?
So after he was released. Yeah,
Why?
He was imprisoned. So when he first started working with St. Teresa, he was imprisoned by the Carmelites because he was going against the grain. He was sort of going against the order.
Okay, so then he came around.
Then he was finally released.
Around to their beliefs then?
No, so I think it was a combination of both. I think part of what was happening is he was doing all of this writing, and there were people that supported him while he was in prison, getting him the materials to write. And then the things that he was writing were getting out to the broader population, and I think it was more of a political thing where it became difficult to hold him. Okay. Does that?
I just wanted to say, I got caught here, that I'm thinking that the Catholic Church actually had their, quote, headquarters, in Spain for a while, too.
Yeah.
And I think that may be why there was more activity, with, Spanish people. The other thing is, I know you're doing poetry on mystics. If you look at the mystics, from very long ago until the present time, a lot of the mystics are persecuted by the church. Mm-hmm. And I mean, almost all of them have been. So because they stand out, a mystic is someone that really goes deep within themselves, and going deep within yourselves is not always going with the grain of the church.
Mm-hmm. Well, and mystics believe that you don't need a mediator between God. I mean, mystics believe that we're one with God. And so, yeah, that's definitely against especially the political structures associated with religion, because the priests want to be the mediator. So, all right, does anybody want to volunteer for the first poem?
Okay,
Kathy? Kathy, did you want to? Oh, okay. I thought you were volunteering.
Looks like I did. God held the earth as if it were his lover and spoke with the most tender of feelings to all in existence as he spoke to me. Look, dear son, I have made a bride for you, and she is shy. So how are you to consummate? I want all souls to consummate with me, so I devised a plan. As each soul looked upon heaven's differences, was dissolved to such a sublime extent that when the heart looked upon any object in this world, it will cry, beloved, and passionately run into the embrace with me. That blessed grace I now know, I now see my beloved everywhere.
So a lot of St. John of the Cross, a lot of his poems have the imagery of like Song of Solomon, the intimacy aspect of it. Does anybody have a comment on this one? I know this one's kind of longer than the other ones.
Well, when it says, I now see my beloved everywhere, that's like the experience of total oneness, where you're in the quantum field and you're embracing all of yourself as being one being. And, I mean, he obviously had been there. So, and that's kind of what we're looking for, is that oneness. So I think it's amazingly insightful.
Yeah. I really like the line that says, as each soul nears heaven, differences will dissolve into such sublime extent that when the heart looks upon any object, this world, it will cry beloved. In this world, it will cry beloved. And what it reminds me of is how when you're looking at, like, let's say different religions, it's almost like a wagon wheel where the spokes all lead to the same center. And the closer you get to the center, the closer you get to everything. And I think it's true, heaven is here and now. And as we begin to open our hearts, and we begin to experience that interpersonally as well as a community. And I think it's interesting, this particular poem was written when he was being beaten every day, and he was trying to learn how to love his oppressors. And that's where this poem came from. And I think that's fascinating. Thankfully, we've evolved to a place where we can just disagree, and sometimes harshly, but we're not beating each other up. Not always. I mean, I guess that still goes on, but not always.
And not beating each other up is kind of where I was going, because it says, look, dear son, I've made a bride for you, but she is shy. So it's just shy.
Right.
They're not jerks. You're not a jerk. It's just, you're just a little bit afraid.
Right.
Of the unknown.
Right. Which I think that's where all conflict comes from anyway. Anybody else? We can go to the next one. Is anybody? Yay. Teresa wants to volunteer.
Thank you. What is grace? I asked God, and he say, all that happens. He then add, when I look perplexed, could not lovers say that every moment in their beloved's arms was grace? Existence is my arms, though I well understand how one can turn away from me until the heart has wisdom.
Go ahead.
Well, what I love about this is when it say that all that happens.
Yeah.
And I can realize lately that I'm not a victim. It's like everything that happens in my life is gonna help me grow, and it's for my better good, you know. And I was used to be in that victim mode all the time. Everything happens to me, blah blah blah. And now I start doing. It did happen, and then I realized, but look me now. I can do this. I can do that. I can go inside. I find my God inside of me. I right now, like, you know, things that happens, and like, you know, the phone in the morning, that you just wake up and see the phone, and there's something, you know, lovely, and something there, or an answer.
And I
that
love
you're
your
looking.
Facebook posts.
Thank you. But it's really beautiful. I don't know. I kind of feel right now in my life that I kind of be in this side of love, because I choose to be there. I want to be there. And doesn't mean that life is not, you know, sometimes, how do you say, like, I don't know, struggle or whatever. But it's my show if I want to be in that place, or I can see the good in this situation. So I love it.
That's really good.
And I think he's saying that everything outside of God is not grace. So the absence of God is not grace. Everything, when seen from love, that's grace.
Yeah. There's a line in A Course in Miracles that says, oh, what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. And if God made everything, then it's all-encompassing. That's, you know, what we say in Unity, that there's only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good omnipotent, which means that there is no opposite. We can conjure up mental images that say this is the opposite. And I mean, can you imagine being in prison? You know, I read some of the stories about it. He was withheld food, beaten every day. And then he asked God, what is grace? And God says, the internal spirit says, all that happens. Right? I would be pissed. I would be mad about that. You know, and then it goes on to talk about, you know, well, if you're in the beloved's arms, you know, could not lovers say that every moment in their beloved's arms was grace? And what he was addressing there is that, you know, it's kind of like what David said in the Psalms. If I go up to heaven, I find God. If I go down to the pits, I find God there too. You know? Yeah, what is grace? All that happens. All that happens. Anybody else? All right, do we have another volunteer? All right, this is one of my favorites.
Why does not the church tell you? At last the time came for the bride to be with him. Nothing all the other brides had ever known could have prepared me. Only the beauty and light you cannot describe has a place in his house. I can touch God, yes, but not with anything I own, not with anything I can identify with, not with anything that knows me. Purity, have you ever contemplated that word? I once beheld the root of the Immaculate, and it drew me into itself. I looked it all through his eyes. Why does not my sacred church tell you? God only sees himself. That's cool.
You spot it, you got it.
Yeah.
That is cool.
That's probably why they imprisoned him.
Yeah. Well, the root of the Immaculate is the vision of Celestine prophecy. It's when you go back to that, the root where everything has that source.
Yeah.
that just kind of takes you there. It's kind of fun.
I can touch God, yes, but not with anything I own. It's not out there. I can't. There's nothing out there that's ever going to do it. It's all internal. That's the one line that I really like, and I also really like. Why does not my sacred church tell you? God only sees himself. Because I mean, like we said, that's all that there is. What else is there? Anybody else? All right, we can move on. Oh.
When he wrote his poems, were they all hand copied and hand distributed?
Yes. Yep.
I'm surprised that they let this go.
Well, and prison guards snuck them in and out. Prison guards that were sort of on his side snuck things in and out for him. Yep. Yeah. Nope. No. Well, and the thing is it's good to know. It's good to know that no matter how low you are, that God's still there, and that people went that low, so we don't have to. We can go, okay, God's everywhere. Somebody else did that. I remember one time I was this was when I was deconverting, my parents' religion, essentially. And there was a lot of persecution talk. There was a lot of talk about, they're gonna get you. And I remember I was terrified of that. We're talking, I was in my 20s, and I was kicked out of, I didn't have any community at the time. I mean, I was developing community, but I was kicked out of the community I was in, and my family really didn't have anything to do with me. And so I was really afraid. And I thought they're going to get me, because that's what I was told. And that's what I just experienced. All these people are like, you don't belong to us. And so I was out there on my own. And I remember it was the presence of Jesus, or, the Christ within spoke to me, but I knew it was, Jesus saying, I already did that part. I already went that low, so you don't have to. And I think that's one of the things that we can take from this too, is that people who've went to those low moments and can say, hey, God's there too, means that we don't have to do that. That we can just recognize God now. We don't have to go to those. We can just trust that, okay, that's already done. That part's done.
Can we?
I don't know. Can you?
Can we just trust?
Well, I don't know. Can we? I mean, that's what I took, especially from that in my 20s. I was like, fine, you did that part already. I'm not going to go through that. And that was enough for me. And I mean, thankfully, no one's, since then, no one has really came after me. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody can, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't matter how low you go. God's going to show up anyway. And some people have to, I guess, go that low to see the contradiction. But you know what? Why not go high too and say, hey, he's up here too. I think that the true mystical journey is the highs and the lows, and seeing God everywhere. Yeah. Yep. All right. Any other questions or any other comments?
I'll throw out the comment that if he had not suffered, then that message that someone needed, okay, myself, I love the message, that if he had not written this message, because we all need a roadmap. Yeah. And so God used him to show us that God sees himself everywhere, know, and that we should have our eyes open too. So the lows that come to some individuals is they are allowing themselves to be a messenger of God in a different way than some people want to be. Right. But obviously he was willing to take on that suffering, just as Jesus the Christ took on the suffering. We could call him also the Christ.
Well, and in reading some of these poems, and he has a lot of poems, I mean, reading a lot of his poems, of course somebody kept smuggling in paper and smuggling it out. And of course that it only makes sense that he would, you know, as these were being circulated, that people go, wait, he knows something that we don't know. Because I'm sure everyone, at least in the area where he was at, that were a part of the Carmelite order, they knew what was going on. They knew what was happening to him. And yet he's writing this stuff about being connected to God. I mean, if I was a prison guard, I'd be like, yeah, I need to know I need to know what you know. Because you're going through something real rough. It reminds me of the story of the Buddhist monastery that was being taken over, and guys came in with guns. And I don't know if it's historical or if it's just a parable, but guys came in with guns, and they said, all need to get on the ground. And one of the monks just stood there. And he says, do you know who I am? And then the monk says, yes, but you don't know who I am. I can just stand here. And it totally transformed, you know, the whole situation. And they said, I want to know what you know. And I'm sure that that's what was going on here, where the prison guards are like reading what he's saying is, I want to know what you know, because you definitely know something I don't, because I wouldn't be able to go through this. Because he may have had ultimatums. He may have said, you know, if you just go with the party line, you will let you out, we'll stop mistreating you, we'll feed you. And for some reason, he just, no, I can't do that. I don't want to give up this. So, all right. The next one on the list is Jalaluddin Muhammad Muhammad Rumi. I know, right? Yeah, yeah. This one you're probably mostly familiar with, and this is a Sufi mystic. He was born in 1207 in Balkh, Afghanistan. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He succeeded his father as the Sikh of a dervish school. When he was 37, he met Shams, a wandering dervish from Tabriz. And Shams is the same one that a lot of people believe St. Francis met. Because there's some parallels in some of the things St. Francis said and some of the things that Rumi said. So and he was in the same area around the same time. So Shams gave Rumi the option to learn mysticism through scholarship or experience, and Rumi chose experience. So what happened before then is Rumi was, he was the Sikh, so it was his job. You know, he was succeeding his father, so it was his job to, learn these things and to lead the community. And he met Shams, and he saw something in Shams that was different than what he knew. And so he said, well, you can have books, and you can continually read these books, or you can experience something. And the poetry of Shams and Rumi have a very physical and intimate quality to them. Shams was believed to be Rumi's lover. That's why he's got the rainbow around him. And Rumi is considered one of the greatest poets that has ever lived, to have ever lived. So, and does anybody want to volunteer to read the first one?
With passion. With passion, pray. With passion, make love. With passion, drink, dance, and play. Why look like a dead fish in this ocean of God?
Me too.
And for me, I honestly am just learning to have passion and joy, God's joy in my life. Not just joy, just not contentment, but a bubbling, overflowing. I really love everything and everybody. I'm becoming quite, what do they call it, cheesy.
Silly.
I don't even recognize myself. It's like, who is this person? I've become a morning person, a night person, just an overall loving person.
That's awesome.
And it has been amazing. And I'm talking just a few hours. It's so I don't want to start crying.
Oh. You know, and you equated love and joy together, and I personally, this is my belief, that joy is love moving through human consciousness. That's what the experience of joy is. When we really love ourselves as we are, and we love everyone around us and everything around us. You know, that Jesus only gave 2 commandments. You would not think that listening to a lot of religious people. You would think there were a lot of commandments, but he only said 2 things. He said these, he was asked, what do I need to do? And he says, love God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. Well, we've established what is God. All that there is. And that means, to love God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind means that we accept, we love our circumstances. We find love within our circumstances, which, to me, love doesn't start out as an emotion. I believe love is a choice. Emmett Fox is an author, and he talks about how Jesus said to love your neighbor and love your enemies. Well, there's nobody out there that likes their enemy, because like is an emotion. Love is a choice. Love is I want what's best for you. I accept you exactly as you are. I don't need to control which direction your life goes. I accept you just as you are. You don't need to change on my account. But then when we're there and we just want what's best for them, and if we can really recognize, what, they're a part of God too, what's best for them is already happening. They're already headed on that journey. When that moves through our consciousness, that's when the experience of joy comes in. So I'll say a lot of times that I believe that joy is love moving through human consciousness. That's how I've experienced joy. And then the second commandment that Jesus gave is love your neighbor as yourself, which is kind of established in the first one, but I think that people, it's as yourself, which means that we have to be able to see ourselves as perfect divine beings. And, that's why I'm really a proponent of mirror work, looking in the mirror and saying, to yourself, using your name, James, I love you exactly as you are. You're perfect and beautiful. And see what happens. You might want to break the mirror, which is good, because you've established where you're at with that. And so, we don't have to, this idea that we have to earn love, that we need to do something to be lovable. We're lovable because we exist. That's where, and so, the 2 commandments that Jesus gave really gets us into the flow of joy, where we can, with passion, make love. With passion, drink, with dance, and play. And why look like a dead fish in this ocean of God? Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, James, I was just going to say, in Unity circles, we would, at Charles Fillmore, one of the 12 powers is zeal. Mm-hmm. So I kind of equate that with, with what he's talking about with passion there. Going back to Rumi, I just wanted to say one thing. Rumi is kind of the figurehead of the Sufis. And Sufism is part of the Islamic religion. And if you look at that religion, they're also the ones that are persecuted within their own religion, and yet still stay in that religion because that's what they're about. But again, that's why we consider Rumi a mystic, and much of the Sufis actually part of that mysticism tradition.
They spin around, and it's really fascinating. I was a part of a community, a New Thought community. It wasn't really a church, but we had several Sufis that went there, and so we would do song and dance and drumming circles and stuff, and they would spin around and around and around, and I have and they would say they would just experience bliss, and when I tried to do it, I'd just fall down. It was not blissful. It was like everything. I would try and stop spinning, but nothing else would stop spinning. So
they're called the twirling dervishes.
Yeah, the whirling dervishes. Yeah. Any other comments?
That's also one of the first things little kids do. Is that
they spin around?
Thing.
Yeah.
The little kids do the spinning thing.
Yeah.
I feel like things hit differently when there's passion put into them. Like if you are cooking a dish and you put your passion, it's your passion and you love it, it will taste different. You will feel it in your soul. But if you're just cooking because you're cooking, then all the same ingredients are put in, all the same effort, everything's the same, but it's just that passion is missing. So I think passion definitely hits everything differently. The cooking, cleaning, quilting, crocheting, everything that you can do. It makes it a little more special.
Yeah. And if you're not enjoying it, why do it anyway? Like, do something else. All right. Does anybody want to read the next one? It's a little longer.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, I'm reading it?
I can go. I'll go ahead. Oh, did someone raise your hand? I'm sorry.
That lives in us. If you put your hands on this oar with me, they will never harm another. They will come to find. They will hold everything you want. If you put your hands on the oar with me, they will no longer lift anything to your mouth that might wound your precious land, that sacred earth that is your body. If you put your soul against the oar with me, the power that made the universe will enter your sinew from a source not outside your limbs, but from a holy realm that lives in us. Exuberant is existence, time a husk. When the moment cracks open, ecstasy leaps out and devours space. Love goes mad with the blessings like my words give. Why lay yourself on the torturer's rack of the past and future? The mind that tries to shape tomorrow beyond its other capabilities will find no rest. Be kind to yourself, dear, to our innocent follies. Forget any sound or touch you knew that did not help you dance. You will come to see that all evolves us. If you put your heart against the earth with me, in serving every creature, our beloved will enter you from our sacred realm, and we will be so happy.
Any comments?
I love the line that says, "Why lay yourself on the torturer's rack of the past and future?" That, it's just that be in the present moment and be in the awareness of what we live and have our being in and what lives and has its being in us, and just be present to now. And I love that. Because it is a torturer's rack sometimes.
It is, yeah. Exuberant is existence, time, a husk.
I was just going to say that about time.
Yeah.
As well, a husk, that's not the corn on the cob. That's the crud on the outside you got to tear off. And, and then it says, when the moment cracks open, ecstasy leaps out and devours space. Love goes mad with blessings, like my words give. The mind that tries to shape tomorrow beyond its own capacities will find no rest, and I can testify to that.
I think we all can.
Okay, so the husk is a protective shell.
Another way to look at it.
And when we choose to leave that protection behind, we're taking a step like, what's his name? The guy that wrote the movie in the Ark, where he takes a step, there's no bridge there, and he takes a step, and all of a sudden the bridge is there. That's what you're doing when you step out of that husk. And in the Avatar training, That's what they teach you, is how to step out of that husk, because you're eliminating the ego ever so temporarily, but you're eliminating the ego, so you are stepping out of that protection into the unknown, and it's delightfully exuberant when you do that. It's amazing. But it is that protection, and we have to leave that behind.
And this is the only moment that's real. This is it. This is all of it. And it's interesting because the only thing we can ever really think about when we're using our minds to just dwell on things, we can only really use memory, or we can think about the future. Those are the only two real things that there are to think about. And what happens is, if we're overthinking it, then we're not here. Well, where's God? Here. This is it. This is it. And this is it forever. You know, I personally believe that life and the experience of life is eternal. It doesn't mean we can't plan. I don't think that that's what he's getting at. But what he's really trying to get at is, how are we utilizing our capacities, and what are we investing our mental and emotional attention in? I mean, you can tell if you're talking to a person and they're somewhere else. And that's not very loving. Jesus, this goes back to the love of your neighbor as yourself. You can only love someone now. I mean, and there's a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people that have conjured these mental images about the future and have attached so much emotion to those things, and where they can't even be with the present moment. They can't even be with the now and with the people who exist now. And so I think that that's a lot of what he's getting at, is he's getting at, okay, now let's address, all of these mental images and stories that we're creating, whether it's, something from the past that we can't release, or something from the future that I will be happier when stories. I'll be happier when I get the right job, the right house, the right car, the right spouse. Then my life's just going to be so much better then. It's like, yeah, but in the presence of God, there's fullness of joy, is what the Bible says. In the presence of God. Well, where are we now? In the presence of God. So there's no other happier place than right now. And that will be forever. Any other comments?
And as long as you're looking for a happily ever after, it's going to be after, and you're never going to be there. So you have to let it go. And dreaming, if you're not feeling the dream, if you're feeling the dream, you're going to be becoming it.
Yeah.
And if you're not feeling the dream, it's never going to happen. Mm-hmm. You have to be in that feel, which has to be present.
Right. This is where everything's happening. Any other comments? I think for time's sake, we'll just skip to Rumi's last poem. If somebody wants to read it, it is Spiritual Health. So we'll get rid of that one. And, there's Spiritual Health.
I'll go ahead and read it.
Thanks.
A good gauge of spiritual health is to write down the 3 things you most want. If they are in any way differ, you are in trouble.
Kind of a riddle. Any comments?
Trouble being laying yourself on the torturer's rack.
Right. I like what H. Emily Cady says. She talks about how everything that we desire is God. Because God is everything. Yes. I'm so glad that you said that, because I kept looking at the clock, but I really want to.
Come on.
I love St. Teresa of Avila. She's one of my favorites. So let's get to that one.
Okay. I just love this one. How did those priests ever get so serious and preach all that gloom? I don't think God tickled them yet. Beloved, hurry.
It's one of my absolute favorites.
That was a great way to end the
yeah.
poems.
Well, Paul, you're still here. Do you want to close us out then? I thought you were
Sure.
leaving, but
I was going to leave, but it was so good.
well, I'm glad that you're still here.
Okay, I will. I just want to. James really gives out so much wonderful information, and I absolutely love coming to his talks. I hope you do too, and if you do, let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you, James. This is the first time ever in 3 years that I've been doing this class that Tom has not been here. And he's always the one that has our donation basket. So if you would, I was going to say maybe if you have a check or whatever,
Dino.
you could pass it on.
No.
Okay, Dee has
Dee
the
knows
basket
what to do.
That's great. In order for us to function, obviously we need the funding. We have some great things that we put into our church here.